$750,000. That's how much the former Chilliwack school trustee and staunch critic of gender ideology in school, Barry Neufeld in British Columbia, was just slapped with by the province's Human Rights Tribunal. He has to pay $750,000 to the Chilliwack Teachers Association, in short, for not believing in trans people. At least that's the allegation. I have the full document. It's a large ruling. It's going to take some time to go through. And I'll link that in the written article for this report, which you can find in the description box. But for now, hear my interview with Mr. Neufeld himself about his reaction to such a massive penalty and what's next.
Well, I was pretty sure I was going to lose because the BC Human Rights Tribunal is not a fair, just system. And I knew that the teachers were asking for $750,000. I was a little surprised that the tribunal went along with it. But you know what? It's actually turned out to be a good thing. If they had only fined me $75,000, nobody would have been interested. And all those protesters outside wouldn't have been yelling at me as much. But $750,000 really made a lot of people sit up and take notice. What the heck? Why are they doing this to this guy? And Twitter has gone crazy. I've come to the attention of some major movers and shakers in the United States. And of course, I'm talked to my lawyer this morning. This is my first public statement after it happened. We are filing an application for a judicial review. That's sort of like an appeal. But, you know, when I was desperate and I didn't have any lawyer at all, my first day in front of the tribunal, the only representative I had was Carrie Simpson. She's an activist from Langley. And now all sorts of law firms are willing to represent me and take me on. I was an officer of the court for 25 years. I could not believe the legal shoddiness that the tribunal used. They refused to allow witnesses to speak. They shut down testimony before it was done. They made arbitrary decisions that had no basis in law, or there was no rule book or precedent set. They were flying by the seat of their pants, and we could tell that they had already made up their mind what they were going to decide. They were just going through the motions.
Now, I want to circle back to some of what seemed outrageous as part of how they came to their decision. I'm going to actually just read from it. This part here, it says, the BC Human Rights Tribunal says that if a person elects not to believe that gender identity is separate from sex assigned at birth, then they do not believe in trans people, and that this is a form of existential denialism. What do you think when you hear that?
Well, they explained it to me very carefully. I said very clearly, there are only two sexes, male and female. There's nothing else. And they said, well, then you are denying the existence of the many other genders and the non-binary people who are neither gender. And I said, no, I believe they exist, but I think they're deluded. You're either male or female. And they took that as a hateful remark. Now, what's interesting is it's exactly what the President of the United States believes and has said publicly, so I'm in pretty good company there. And I would say that 90% of all ordinary Canadians would believe the same. But they are determined. They are on the cutting edge of a new social justice movement. They are putting people's feelings as more important than physical safety or physical well-being. Keeping people's feelings safe is the most important thing for them.
Well, earlier you mentioned this report. You said the people outside there, that's because there's a protest happening outside of an event that's different. And we're covering that separately. But you're right. When I asked the protesters, why are they protesting this Action for Canada event? One of the ladies brought up your name. Let's show that interaction. Well, you said you were here kind of in part because you wanted me to talk to Mr. Neufeld. What did you want me to ask him?
I wanted to ask him how is he going to pay the $750,000 ruling?
Well, I'll have to wait until the end of the month when my ship comes in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Good luck to you.
Okay.
I hope you get a lot of donations tonight.
Oh, they're not giving anything to me.
Well,
Do you think that was a fair judgment? I mean, like 11 years ago,
yeah.
I just want to say something. Like 11 years ago when someone said, hey, what's your gender? They'd usually say man, female. Nobody thought it was hateful to do so. And now the ruling is saying, if you believe that identity is attached to biological sex, you're denying trans people. Do you think that's a bit extreme?
You don't think that if you've gone... Actually, you know what? I already know how you feel. So it's not the point.
I'm asking how you feel.
How I feel is that it's a fair judgment because the actual fine is only a portion of that $750. The rest is legal fees. He cost the court in time and money and dragged it out. It didn't need to cost this much to anybody. He could have come out of this a lot less in debt than he will be.
Do you believe we should have the right to go through courts and things like that,
Oh,
or to
absolutely.
have free speech?
Yes, I do believe in the court process, but I also believe in showing up when you're supposed to and not dragging things out. And I think when you are a elected official, you have a responsibility to your constituents, and he broke that. And that's, as an average citizen, say what you want. When you're an elected official, you're serving somebody else.
She was basically saying you deserve to pay every cent of that penalty because you've dragged things through the process. What do you make of that?
I certainly didn't drag things through it. They were slow. They'd have one hearing and then we'd have to wait a year and a half for them to get back to it. Frankly, since this diversity, inclusion, and equity thing has happened in all the human resources offices, the Human Rights Tribunal is absolutely swamped with the most crazy and bizarre complaints. I'm sure you're familiar with Jessica Yanoff or Jessica Simpson and the crazy complaints that they accepted. So they're swamped with all this nonsense. And
I'm just going to stop you there. 2 of those complaints are actually against Rebel News. Jessica Serenity Simpson, also known formally as Jonathan Yaniv, had already had the attempt to say that what we reported on this individual, a very violent individual, a criminal, convicted many times, but slap on the wrist, assaulted our reporters, threatened my family. We've brought this type of news to you. And in a real court, the court said, no, there's nothing defamatory here. They're practicing journalism, and this is a matter of public interest. So now this individual is getting to go through this court that's giving you this huge penalty with 2 cases against us for our journalism. And what's so crazy about that is Section 7 of BC's Human Rights Code, for which Simpson is coming at us for, doesn't say whether or not we're getting the facts right. It's not about that. It's about whether or not anything we report on an individual who's been, for example, sexually inappropriate in text message with minors. If we report on something that could cause, people to be hateful or have contempt, that is actually what they are assessing. It's very concerning. What do you think is the main issue over and above the massive penalty, but the fact that you could get hit so hard from simply having a belief that was very mainstream, potentially still mainstream? What's the big message that sends?
I think they're aware there's no way I can, in my lifetime, ever come up with $750,000. But it sets a precedent. And there are a lot of people that believe the same as me, that own a house, have a good job. And since the precedent has already been set, you get nailed with $750,000. That will scare a lot of people into shutting up and not speaking out against this gender ideology. I feel like I've sort of been called to do this. I could have shortened the process by settling out of court, but what I would have to do would be to lie, to say that I was wrong. Initially, the complaint was a little different, you know. Initially, the complaint was that I was creating a toxic work environment for their workers. Well, anybody who knows anything about how school districts work, trustees don't go into classrooms and tell teachers what to do and criticize them for their gender behavior or whatever. We sit in an office and we formulate policy. And once the policy is done, we hand it to the superintendent, and he makes sure that it happens in the classroom. So we have no direct contact with teachers, and so there's no way I could have contributed to a toxic environment in the classroom. And then about 3 years in, they decided to amend their complaint that I was guilty of hate speech. And of course, the hate speech, the only way they can define that is by me saying there's only male and female. So they've done a very good job of scaring a lot of people into silence. But on the other hand, they've stirred up a lot of people to agree with me. I have never heard so many people publicly say that they agree with me and publicly make statements on social media, in meetings, with opinions that agree with me. So I feel like I was put here for this reason. It's important that I appeal the decision and make every effort to overturn it, because there are going to be a lot of people coming after me that will be affected by this decision. It's not just, I'm not doing it just for Barry Neufeld. I'm doing it for children. One of the reasons they feel so strongly about this is that many adult people who have transitioned, they think that I was always intended to be a girl, but I was born with male sex parts. And what they need to do is find children that will say earlier and earlier, I was born in the wrong body. And that's why they keep pushing this gender ideology on younger and younger children. It's to make themselves feel better about themselves, that it wasn't the trauma or all the other things that happened to me in my life. I was born this way, and so I need to find some little kids that also think that they were born this way. I do not believe that anybody is born in the wrong body. I believe in a creator, and I believe that God doesn't make mistakes. And if you're born with boys' parts, you're always going to be a boy. If you're born with girls' parts, you're always going to be a girl.
Do you have any fear saying that? And would you have done anything differently now after receiving this penalty?
I've made a few mistakes along the way, but they're minor and they're off the topic. No. When I first heard about this in the summer of 2017, I knew I could not abide it. I knew I had to speak out, and I knew I could never back down. I was offered a settlement, and I was covered by indemnity insurance. It wouldn't have cost me anything. All I would have had to do was say publicly an apology and say that I was wrong. And I could not do that. I just couldn't live with myself if I told a public lie like that. I talked to my lawyer, James Kitchen, this morning. It's the first time we had a chance to talk since the decision came down. And we're both very determined that we're going to apply for a judicial review. That's kind of like an appeal. And it may take as long as 3 days. James will argue on my behalf, but also there's some freedom organizations that may step in and help us. One of them is the Free Speech Union, represented by Lisa Bildy, and also the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms. I've worked with them in the past, near the beginning of my troubles, and the Democracy Fund. And we're hoping we can interest some other organizations that stand up for traditional family values.
Now, you're not giving up on the fight. You said it's very important that you try and appeal this, and you just had a talk with your lawyers. You said this is your first statement that you're going to make. Tell us what's happening. What's next with the fight?
Well, you were there the day that I turned myself into court on another matter, and that stirred up so much interest that donations started to come in, and my lawyer is completely paid off for everything he's done so far, and we have a few $1,000s extra for this appeal. I've been very humbled by Billboard Chris. He's been tweeting out the how to support me. There's a link on my webpage, which is Barry Neufeld, all one word, BarryNeufeld.com. And on there, you'll find a link to the Rights and Freedoms Fundraising Society. And you can e-transfer money. You can pay by credit card. You can mail a check. The address is there. Or I don't really want the money passing through my hands, because I'm not doing this for the money. I'm doing this to try and protect future generations from this toxic ideology.
You heard how you could support Mr. Neufeld. And also, if you have it in you and you want to protect our journalism in the same area with the same tribunal, please go to stopyaniv.com.